Welcome to The Lost Signals discusses film and TV. Using the revolutionary Manzur-Ramosi Thurlow scale,
or MONS,
we scrupulously review these art forms with an emphasis on narrative structure. Join us for another entertaining episode.
Awe me liberi. Potter Jonathan Ian Manzur Sum. Here with Christopher Morgan.
Power of the podcast compel you.
And Scott Thurlow.
Hostis Humanus.
And today on The Lost Signals Reviews Television and Film, we're talking about two popes.
It's just two popes.
Just two popes.
Poping it up.
Having conversations on a couch. Nuns come in. Just two popes. Trying to fight against the pedophiles of the world. Just two popes. Yeah. All right, this bit's over. Anyway, Chris, would you like to tell us about the plot of Popes? Two Popes.
Yes, I do. Excuse me. Yes, well, it tells the story of Pope Benedict and our current Pope as of 2019, Pope Francis, and Benedict was caught covering up some scandal with his assistant, and he's been covering up some pedophilia in the church.
8-year-olds did.
Yeah, and he and Francis get together, and the whole movie is them talking, and it's more of the first half is more of setup, and the second half is really an exploration of Francis not feeling worthy of this. I mean, what they said there, and to paraphrase Douglas Adams, those who want to lead or power shouldn't be denied it, and those who don't want it are probably the perfect ones. And that was basically...
I thought you just said those who want power shouldn't be denied it.
No, should be denied it. I'm sorry.
That's what it sounded
okay,
like.
Okay,
shouldn't be denied it.
Did I say it?
Yeah.
Did I fuck that up? Okay, I fucked that one up. Okay. But that's basically it. It was basically Benedict talking Francis into taking the papacy.
It's two popes in a room, poping it up, talking about being pope.
Huh?
And not wanting to be pope.
And oregano.
And about the sins of your past.
And the sins of the popes in the church.
And that no pope is a saint.
And no pope is a saint. And outside the Vatican, there's a little kiosk that serves great pizza and coffee.
Mm-hmm.
There's also, even though this has nothing to do with the plot, there's a fucking gift shop at the Vatican where for extra money you can get the item blessed by the Pope.
I know.
So I imagine he's in a warehouse blessing a bunch of tchotchke nonsense.
The church never misses opportunity to make an extra buck off you.
Why does the Pope go to China every year? Don't worry about that.
But anyway, what's your number for this?
It's interesting because the first half I found kind of tedious and uncomfortable, and the second half I found much more interesting in that everybody, even me, in the first half thought Benedict was the Nazi, and the second half you realize that
It's a good Nazi.
well, you know, but the thing is, there's a lot I didn't know about Francis, and I know it said inspired by a true story, quote unquote, which always is dubious to me. So,
they certainly took liberals with, liberalities with the
yeah, but it really could have been more of a puff piece on Francis. So I'm going to give it a 2, 1 for each pope.
I kind of like that. I'll probably follow suit. Like, I guess I didn't feel as it was as Ian said, just precast, like dense. I thought it was fine paced. It was 2 hours and change, like low 2s, and I thought that was perfectly a fine length. I do kind of agree, Chris, that the first hour's a little, like the first half, we'll say, is a little, like, has moments of it kind of dragging, like slow moments, I guess. But overall, I thought it was fine. And yeah, like a 2, I think, is a perfectly fine score. I don't think it's weak enough for a 1, but nor I think it's very strong, compelling, like super compelling for a 3. But I do think what they had to work with and what, basically it's just fucking Anthony Hopkins and Jonathan Pryce, like talking to each other about various things. So like given that, I think it was done well enough. And there's some interesting stuff thrown in there. Maybe we'll get to in a second, the themes, but I will give plot a 2.
So tonally, it's a very strange movie because after the 2016 election in America, Tom Perez attempted to do a unity tour, and I felt that this was the Catholic's unity
version of it.
movie. If you're a conservative Catholic, if you're a more progressive Catholic, Benedict and Francis got together over football and pizza, and you can
come together right now over me.
You can learn about the Beatles together. It weirdly had like almost a 90s quality, like old people finding friends later in life.
I see what you mean.
Quality to it, but at the core, it's about also terrible things that occurred to both of these people, which is Francis being, and this is, from what I understand, very, very true to real life, when he was in Argentina with the military dictatorship that occurred, and he was trying his best to weave both the politics, keep on the good graces of the dictatorship while saving his thing, and he was stripped of his position as head of the Jesuits for that. People he were dragged off to secret jails and killed, and people were disappeared, and meanwhile Ratzinger is covering up child molestation and others, but a little bit of football and beer and talk about Beatles. We can. That is what's really important, and it's so tonally, it's very, very strange to me.
It can be odd. I agree with that. Yes.
Can I just say something just on? Were it not for this director, were it not for these two actors, this could have very easily been a TV movie of the week.
Sure,
very well.
I do very much see that. Yeah,
and the thing is, it's a well constructed movie.
Yeah,
that feels like a great window dressing on great sins. I don't know. I'm going to give it a 2 as well, because you can't fault it for its craftsmanship. Although perhaps thematically, which we'll get to in a second. Yeah. Scott, go on, talk about themes.
Yeah, so you're right. It can be a little like jarring, I suppose, because the first, I guess I'll say, until the part where Benedict is called back to Rome. So Francis comes to visit him at the Pope's summer castle, of course, and they're having more of a ideological and philosophical disagreement about what direction the church should take and like what's happening within it. And then they start to sort of open up to each other and come to a more agreeable relationship when they're discussing stuff in Rome. So like, yeah, but like it's not glossed over, but it's not also explored a lot deeper. Like you said, like the cover up of the abuse and like that was a scandal that was happening, which is why he had to return in the first place. And on top of that, Francis trying to convince me like we should maybe take a softer stance in our attitudes toward like gay people and attitudes toward this and that. Like these are that social issues, and like that stuff is fine that it's there, but it's like also not the focal point of the film either, right? So like they have to address it. They have to include some of that material, but it's definitely not like the biggest thrusting point thematically, at least to me. So like I'm not really sure about this one. I don't know if I can give it like a default 0 because of that, but also I don't know if it's strong enough for a 1 because, like you said, it's mostly them. Like, yeah, the biggest thrust, I suppose, is them, their friendship and their evolution of that, and that's supposed to make us feel good, I guess, and it does kind of like it's odd. So like I think they maybe were it by different group or by different director and stuff, or if it was like more movie of the week, they would have had more of that, like more weight to it, more impactfulness there. But as of now, like my reaction is sort of to give it a softer 0 because I don't think they addressed it well enough. And while yes, the theme of friendship and a community coming together is fine and it certainly is there, I don't know if that was necessarily like the strongest thing either.
Can I? Do you mind if I?
No one's talking but him.
Yeah. It's really funny because I'm wearing my Sacred Heart Godzilla shirt today, and had my Bernie shirt arrive, I might have worn that. And I am bringing this to a point. A friend once said to me, when we were discussing, but even before Francis, the different dioceses that are trying to be a little more progressive versus the more conservative. And he pointed out that, religions, organized religions with a set of dogma are really kind of political parties.
Of course.
But that made me think of this, film as an exploration of politics. I mean, in this case, it is the Pope, and I was trying to figure out, well, is this Reagan and Bernie? Is this Reagan and, Warren? And I'm dating this thing because it's December 2019, but I was thinking a lot about politics. And one of the things one of the debates is like Bernie keeps saying the same things, Medicare for all, because he's trying to appeal to a wider audience. And this Pope, to your point, what you were saying about, being more leniency on sex education and homosexuality, the one thing he kept stressing, or at least the one theme that kept being imparted, at least with Francis, was building bridges to essentially end corruption.
It was there, but
what I'm saying is this was more. I mean, this film was a sign of the times, is my point. And this film, to me, was more of a political discussion that, right now you can take this film and apply it to the politics that are happening now, not just within the Catholic Church, but within politics. I'm not sitting here trying to inflict my political views on anybody, which should be pretty apparent by now, if you've listened to us. But I'm just saying, to me, this was more of a political film. Yeah, it ended up being two buddies on the couch watching football, eating pizza and drinking Fanta and beer.
I totally get what you mean.
But my whole thing is, thematically, to me, it seemed more of an exploration of politics. I might be coming on the other side of you and giving it a softer one.
I see what you mean, though, for sure.
I don't feel like it quite gelled, but I do feel like there was enough there for me to think about it while I was watching it.
The irony of Fanta is great. You know its history?
No, I do not.
Because during World War II, Germany couldn't get imported soda, so they developed Fanta.
No.
Yeah, so it is a...
I had a comment on that.
Not nowadays, but it's history, so that's funny. But nonetheless, this is also a discussion very much, and I promised Steve I wouldn't bring up other films too much, but in Timbuktu, which was a discussion of our conservative versus more lenient Islam, this was a discussion over the state of the church, though. And I thought that was my favorite parts of this was, especially when they're at odds at the very beginning, and they'd have those discussions over what it means, or what the roles and
the church should be, etc.
And Ratzinger is defending his ideal of what the church is as an institution. And actually, in the flashback, which I thought was also a great part of the movie, going with Francis's history, the fact that he was too. He was seeking out to preserve the church and not the mission, not the people involved, and it backfired on him. And he learned all the lessons that Ratzinger didn't, that the institution itself needs to change with the times, because in trying to preserve the institution itself, in a sense, almost the purity test of being a Catholic means is not about the people, it's about the trappings of being a priest. And Ratzinger was very famous for that, bringing back the shoes and the dressing and all of the rituals. Yes. And that was to him what the church was. But, and throughout, it's really showing Francis about the people and about the fact that we need to, it's not about the ritual, it's about the wisdom that's imparted upon the people. And that was a big debate. I think that, and it was very much pro
Pope Francis, for sure.
Pope Francis' viewpoint on that.
But it could have, as I said before, I did like the fact that they showed how Francis came to this, where he was. And I also liked, one of the things that really endeared me to this film, that it wasn't just a puff piece. And I'm not referencing another film, but I'm referencing The Hill Rising. Okay, yeah. Where you have somebody like a progressive like Cenk Uygur, and you've got more of an anti-establishment conservative in Sagar, and he's just but my whole point is, he may not agree with him, because he said in the story, he goes, I don't agree with you, but Benedict said to Francis, I don't agree with pretty much everything you said, but I'm bringing you in here because you're right, the church has to change, and I'm incapable of it. So my whole point is, this to me was crossing political ideology for the greater good.
Well, I will back you up on this fact that when people criticize Bernie and saying, well, you're not a Democrat, that's the argument of preserving an ideal of an institution versus reaching out to the people and what
serving the needs
and that's why I think you can actually bring draw that huge parallel there. And I'm not a man for institutions. I am generally, I'm a jerk generally in life and a contrarian, and that's why I'm drawn to people like Francis, or in their attempts to buck the traditions and go real to the heart of it. I like Martin Luther quite a bit as well for his attempts to do that back in the day. So Francis is not by any means a unique figure in history, but neither is, and unfortunately, Ratzinger is the same has been around forever as well.
But I also like the fact that they did not shy away from the fact that, you know, that Francis is still called a traitor to this day.
Oh yeah.
Which is easy to, as Beth and I were discussing.
They could have ignored that or brushed past it.
Which Beth and I were discussing earlier today, that, you know, it's when you label people, you're taking away their capacity to change, capacity to learn. You know, you're doing away with the fact that we are humans, and it's not always, we're not the idealists who stand up against tyranny and stand up. You know, people want to get on with their lives, you know, and it's easy to sit here and say in a hypothetical situation, oh yeah, if so-and-so came to town, you know, the Nazis came to town, I'd stand up. But, you know, where does fear draw in? Where does protecting that which you love, whether it's a person, whether it's an institution? And they could have really shied away with that when it came to Francis, is all my point.
So what are you giving it, E?
No, there's parts about this I liked, parts I didn't like.
I'm in the same boat, kind of.
Because I really did enjoy the philosophical discussions on, especially at the beginning. And it's sort of like, I want to give the first act a 1, and the second act, when they kind of, I feel, for the sake of unity, decide not to have the and if history actually serves, Francis is kind of losing the battle right now. That the conservatives, the Ratzingers, have successfully defeated him, even though in this movie he has a victory. It's
well, I mean, if you look at when he was named Pope, it was like, yeah, he's Pope. The first thing he said was, you know, because I've often said that, like, the Catholic charities and so forth, I'm like, open up the fucking Vatican vaults, and 1,000 years of indulgences, you could do really well. So when Francis,
but they paid off all the victims of the kids they slept.
Well, I'm not going right there, because there's a monetary. I don't think there's certain things that money can solve. But when Francis came out, I was
not serious with my comment there.
No. But I didn't think you were, which is why I'm not addressing it really. And I also didn't want you to think I was just glossing.
Anyways.
I didn't want you to think I was being dismissive. But my whole point was, when Francis said, "Yeah, we have to do away with this opulence," it's really funny, because it reminds me of the Democrats now. It's just like, I'm pro this, that, and the other thing. And it's just like, oh wait, we're touching money now. It's amazing how progressive ideas can become conservative when we're discussing money.
That's true.
And so that was not wholly addressed in this, but it was an aspect of it. And I was coming to a point with that. Okay. So I just want to let you know, because you went all right. And I was actually getting to a point with that.
Waiting on you.
So what are you giving it?
I'm going to give it a 1.
Okay.
I mean, the fact that we're talking about this now, I think it gives credence to the fact that it deserves a 1 thematically.
But I don't know if we're drawing out the points we want to see versus the reality of what it was intending to do, and there's something very divisive. It's almost like these two popes are on different sides, and I don't know what it stands. I might have to give it a soft 1.
I think I might do the same, because I guess you're right. Like, there is enough there that you can get a decent discussion out of it. And yeah, it wasn't devoid of it. I just don't know if it was addressed, like, again, as impactful as a manner as maybe the film intended, but it certainly was there. So maybe at this point, I think I will also pretty much go with a soft 1, but still a 1 nonetheless, thematically.
And I'm on to antagonist here. And for a large part, Ratzinger is the antagonist of.
Well, for the first half of the movie,
and then they're not. They become friends, but it's really an attempt. Although it was almost Socratic dialogue in the sense that it's so towards Pope Francis that I felt that wasn't a real debate. it was
like a straw man.
Yeah, they were straw manning Ratzinger's position here. Even though I agree with,
even if you agree with Francis's points, anyways.
Yeah. But so I don't know if there is. I mean, you can do like inherent corruption within the church and how
of course, I was gonna say
the different ways people deal with it, but it almost feels that Francis is above the fray, and Ratzinger himself is far more troubled and antagonized by that corruption, because it's almost that Francis is too pure to, like, if he had been, like, even though in reality he did fall to the scandals and defending people who likely shouldn't have been defended. It's complicated, but I don't know if this movie makes it that distinction well.
Usually, we're prone to the bigger concepts of antagonism, but I think by design, and this is to the movie's credit, I'm giving this a 0 because I don't feel like there is anything that antagonizes him besides personal history, life itself, institutions. It's so large and vague, and I'm not trying to dismiss any one component's importance, but I do not think for this film the point was to have an antagonist. I feel it was more of something that would lend itself to a discussion, and I don't really see even a thematic antagonist because it's just too broad. And I think that is just the nature of the movie. So my opinion, from my view, unless you guys want to change it, I'd give it a 0, not as a fault to the movie, but I think it just is a design to the way it was presented.
That was well said.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. And I think maybe I'll just build on it that maybe you might make an argument like, oh, they're internally antagonized, struggling with themselves, but that's also super, super broad as well. Like you said, like the institution, yes, the corruption that was happening, the scandals that were happening, but that, again, it isn't really what the movie's about. So if you look at the narrative itself, like what the story that we're being told is, there isn't much there. I pretty much agree with that. Mm-hmm. So like, yeah, maybe Chris, like by default, just like you said, like sort of by design, it defaults to a 0, but I tend to largely agree with that aspect, that angle.
All right, Chris, talk about the protagonist.
Are you giving a 0 too?
I am.
The protagonist, this is going to be a shared protagonist. I think, God, thank you, Rick and Morty. Sorry to Steve-O, but because of the two brothers, I'm not going to be able to chuckle without saying two popes.
Two popes.
But honestly, I really think that both I think without the other, you could not have a protagonist in this. I don't think without these two presenting their arguments, their opinions, their point of views, even though we went a little more into the history of Francis over Benedict, I do think that there could be no film, there could be no protagonist. There could be nothing that drive the narrative without both of them here. I mean, they both were a companion and a reaction to the other one. So
I didn't disagree with that.
I think because you mentioned it, because of the very fact we get so much more of Francis' backstory, like what happened to him in the military coup, and his experiences then, and how that changed him and informed his opinions and vision for what the church should be, and just himself in general. I think he's the protagonist, and Benedict Anthony Hopkins is the secondary. Like, there are only two characters, with Francis being the main character and Benedict being like the most important secondary character. But that's how I very much viewed it, not solely, but largely in light of the fact that we do get so much more of a history. It is obviously his story, Francis's that is, of him, his interactions and discussions with Benedict. So that's how I view it.
Evidence A. When they confess to each other their sins in the past, we get an entire visual background of Francis's life. We get a muted and version of Ratzinger Benedict. Let's call give her respect. And it's more important is the reaction that Francis gives to hearing the story versus us being privy to it. So it's Francis' story
through his eyes, is what I'm saying as well. Yeah.
Okay, that was very simple, but you convinced me.
I just think like it was pretty clear to me. Like I get because like on the outset on paper you might think of course they're the two main characters, but I think the way the story is presented, it's weighted much more towards Francis, and I'm going to put him in protagonist and give him a very strong one. Jonathan Pryce was excellent in this role for sure.
Okay, you convinced me.
By the way, I also believe that Jonathan Pryce should be nominated and perhaps win
For Pope?
Best actor. Because I think he did a phenomenal job.
No,
It's
he was
a long
fantastic.
time coming for him to get the acknowledgement that he deserves.
I'm going to say this, though. The fact that he specifically had to learn 3 languages for this film
Pretty badass.
impressed the shit out of me.
For sure.
And it's not even like just general Argentinian Spanish.
Yeah. A very specific dialect, if you will.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think like because of that, I'm giving him a very strong 1, and he is definitely the protagonist to me.
Scott, supporting.
Well, like I said, then that leaves Anthony Hopkins as Benedict as the pretty much the only other, like, everything else is basically like random guards and security guys and backdrops, right? Like, yes, there are characters from Francis's, again, backstory from his younger days, but those are just sort of ancillary at best, I would say. They're not really part of the main story, even though they are part of his past, which is, I know it's kind of odd to say, but as I just said, I can't go back on it, and I won't, because I think it's clear enough to me that Hopkins as Benedict is the secondary character that matters the most, and it's their relationship. Now, yes, we don't get as much the moments the evidence, if you will, either you just said, I think solidifies the reasons to put him in secondary. But yeah, of course, it's Anthony Hopkins, and he was also very good. I think it was a great portrayal, and they had a great dynamic with each other. Their chemistry, I think, was pretty apparent. And yeah, so like, even though it's basically those two, one protagonist, one secondary, and everyone else is sort of just tertiary background stuff, that still he still turned in a great performance, and they played off against each other very, very well, and I'm giving him a 1.
I do have to say, though, they did a good job of at least making the, in a sense, background characters slightly memorable.
Sure.
I can distinctly, even though we just saw this, but like sometimes they all fade into the
They
background
could
fairly quickly.
blur together, yeah.
This, the driver had a personality to him. The gardener had a personality to him. The nun
That's
had.
a
Like,
good
so, like,
point.
all these people are kind of at least somewhat memorable. Not that many years from now I'll remember them, but as of right now, the impression is that they're not just a monolith of background
That's
characters.
true.
They all did
A couple of them get a little moment to shine, so that's a fair point, yeah.
And the supporting characters, those background characters, do add credence to the fact that Francis was a protagonist, because it does show that he is a man of the people in the most basic way, even sitting next to some guy at a bar watching football, which I thought was fabulous.
It was a good scene.
I loved his appreciation of pizza and coffee and oregano, even though oregano is not one of my favorite spice seasons. No, I agree. Really nice.
Oh, and also the Swiss guard with the cell phone was
That was, again, a nice little moment. Like, that was funny.
That was
and,
awesome.
and gave them all a little bit of characterization, like, here and there. Sure.
Really nice texture.
Gates, on to you with dialogue. I believe this was a play beforehand, and it's shows.
I mean, it's a 2-man show, like we just said, pretty much.
And the dialogue, for the most part, is good to, at times, great. Especially their philosophical debates early on were done really well.
Those are the centerpieces, obviously, but yeah.
But, like, there's a couple of lines in there which, I mean, even some of the things that are, like, throwaway actually have kind of a deeper, like, when Benedict is musing about, I'm going to butcher the line here, but it's like, they say that God puts this another pope in to rectify the mistakes of the previous pope, and he's like, I'm glad to be able to, like, all these little lines worked for me, and it's also two fantastic character actors, just bouncing off each other. So, granted, I'm giving a lot of credit to the dialogue to the actors who portrayed it, but I think that the dialogue was strong enough.
The dialogue was great. It was very natural, which is always going to get a 1 from me. But it is worth the price of admission and I know it may just seem like a Who's on First variant, but the Abbey Road discussion when they're at the piano, I thought was
it's a very funny, clever moment.
It was because there is somebody who is actually there and not recognizing it, but being told what he was there. And there was somebody who wasn't there, Francis, who knew what it was and had reference for it. And it was just a lovely little conversation.
But also, I'm bringing up Eleanor Rigby, which has a lot to do with thematically matching with the...
There was no accident that they had.
There was no accident with Eleanor Rigby. Beautiful.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, it's philosophically engaging, I guess I'll say, like intellectually stimulating to a decent degree.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like what they, of course, as you mentioned, these are great actors, like renowned, and they're going to always pretty much turn in a good performance. But I think the fact it was bolstered by what was on the written page, if you will, that they were able to, like you said, Chris, believably have these conversations that didn't feel stilted, that didn't feel forced. So I'll give it a dialogue, a pretty strong one, in fact.
All right, style.
I really loved the style of this film. I loved the score of this film.
The score is very nice, yes, I agree with
I
that.
loved all the variations of the pop songs because they did have different versions of different songs portrayed. I love the cinema veritas of certain scenes, and certain scenes were a little more cinematic.
Yes,
for lack of a better
I see
word.
exactly what you mean, though.
There was a great dichotomy, and everything in this film was really well balanced. I thought having these very lush cinematic things.
Yes, I wrote down lush scenes in my notes, but good call.
Sorry.
Good call.
Plus the rougher, more grainy version. You know, I just thought the style of this was worth the price of admission. So I'm giving it a very strong.
I mean, yeah, it's damn solid. It's not like fucking Kubrick-esque or anything like that, but there were some very nice, beautiful shots, especially in the garden and up the churches, of course, like in the little chapel. And just overall shot real nice. I actually like the fact that, I thought you might have mentioned this or comment upon it, where in the garden and then when they're in the private room, it's very, the close-ups are very intense. So it's like you're right there with them. It's it's very voyeuristic.
Well, I haven't talked yet, so I haven't brought it.
But I thought you were going to mention it to me while we were watching or something. But I'm mentioning it now. So I thought that was a nice little touch. Like it adds a lot to sort of the intensity of the moment when they're, at odds with each other and just disagreeing, or even when they start to soften up. And Francis tells about his, past history, and that was shot, all those segments were shot very nicely, I thought. And yes, the soundtrack was matched pretty damn good and was a good compliment to the action and what was happening and sort of reflected back. So yeah, I think style's pretty damn strong, and I will give it a 1.
A movie based off of a play, especially one involving two actors playing off each other, can easily fall into the trap of being shot like a play.
Yeah, true.
Not that always a trap sometimes done well, but this didn't feel like they were. It felt like they're filming a cinema, not
an adaptation of it.
Yeah. So, what I realized, even though this is a fictional story, they added in actual footage, like interviews and things like that, which is a wonderfully sneaky way of saying, I'm telling you fiction, but I'm going to make you believe it's real.
Sure.
And we
pointed that out before, though, but you're right.
Yeah, the tale is inspired by.
Mm-hmm. No, but it's very much this meeting never actually occurred. They met, I believe, after he was already took over as Pope.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it does matter, because what they did was they sold a fiction as a reality and pulled it off. Because I think a lot of people who went to see this will believe this is true.
Or at least
and it isn't the great sin creating a truth that should not exist. So
does that mean you're giving it a 1?
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 1. Obviously, overall, I thought it was very well shot.
I mean, I definitely agree.
Some of the flashbacks at times felt almost, I think you brought this up earlier, TV movie-ish, but not enough to detract from that. It's attention to detail, and they're trying to, they built the Sistine Chapel because they couldn't film the Sistine Chapel.
Yeah.
The
sets were very nice, for sure. I guess I'll add one nitpick. I'm still giving it a 1, but I just noted, I have a note that sometimes obvious symbolism is obvious in this film, and I get it. It's fine. It's not too detracting, but it's clearly there.
As they flash to pictures in Drumba in the Sistine Chapel,
exactly,
which match the story he's telling. I don't know.
Yeah. They're talking about the banks, and it goes to the Golden Calf. I got you.
And all the pictures of the wall, building bridges, not walls, building bridges, not walls. But I am going to say one final thing is, to the music, I love the use of saxophone. And to me, as a musician and composer, I have a love-hate relationship with the saxophone. When it's used great, well, it's like anything else. When it's used great, I love it. And otherwise, it feels very cheap.
Wanna.
Yeah. But this way, I loved the use, because the way that it would be in a distant echo chamber and then brought to the fore. I do have to give props to, once again, the music, especially the use of saxophone in this.
Cool. All right, Scott, do you recommend Two Popes?
I'm not sure. I'm giving it a pretty good score, I think, at this point, right? Like an 8 or 7 or 8 or something. But like, I don't know, man. Again, we're in Oscar season, or at least leading up to it. So we're hedging our bets. I keep saying this, and that's the reason we did this film as well, because it has a decent-ish possibility, or at least it had some traction, then not, whatever. You were saying Jonathan Pryce might get Best Actor nom, like that's cool, but doesn't really help us out if it's best pick. So I'm not saying it wasn't enjoyable or a well done movie, but I don't know if I would recommend it more than I wouldn't. And I'd be like, yeah, sure, if you're into it, it's a good film, but there's other stuff out there. So I'm literally wavering. So with that, knowing that, why don't you guys try to convince me whether or not you would?
Hey, go on.
Because there are things I really like about this. Performances are outstanding.
Sure.
Actually, no. They're not outstanding. They're good. They're good. It's not like I wasn't floored by the performances.
Yeah, exactly.
I just thought, like, overall, something strange about this movie. It's that it's good, but honestly, it's going to be very forgettable for me.
Yeah.
The thing is, the thing that really parts is that I learned some fictitious history about the Pope. That's what's going to I'm going to take away from this. Like, I have a better
idea.
I come out not an idea, but I think of Pope Francis better now. Like, this guy went through some troubles in his life, which he did, and it's and like Benedict doesn't seem like a Nazi, which is what they actually kind of reference that.
Sure.
So many people view that way.
Yeah,
but who knows? Because this is based on a true story or inspired by true events. So I don't know if I can recommend it because if nothing else is on, sure, watch this. Just don't go out of your way to see it.
Yeah. What do you think, Chris?
I was on the fence, but I've made a decision now. Empirically, Marriage Story was a better film.
Oh yeah, for sure. I agree with it.
For personal reasons, because it was traumatic for me, I did not recommend it. Now, both of these films are on Netflix and very easily accessible. And yet, speaking of Argentina, if you're going to watch a Netflix film, I am going to recommend The Distinguished Citizen.
You know, it's funny. Like I thought about that film in a moment while I was watching this.
Right. So did I. I was thinking about that film a lot watching this.
Maybe because they had a Pope joke in that film, but either way.
Yeah, because I thoroughly enjoyed that film. And I know the three of us, actually, ironically enough, the three of us were the ones who reviewed that film. But to me, while I enjoyed the political discussion and it did bring up for conversation, empirically, A Marriage Story is a better film, and I only didn't recommend it for personal reasons because how uncomfortable. It took me over 3 hours to watch a 2 hour and 50 for a film that was just basically this length. And thereby I cannot, being fair, I like this movie, but I agree with you. It's not something that's going to stick with me. There's a bunch of films we saw over this past year that are going to stick with me, that do stick with me. And even Marriage Story, for its own reasons, sticks with me. I agree with you. I'm going to give this one maybe a softer 0, but it's still going to get a 0.
See, I think Catholics should watch it.
They probably will anyways.
Yeah.
Like, our opinion won't matter in terms of that.
And it's you don't have to be religious to get something out of this film. It's just, I don't know, just there's something about it that didn't fire on all cylinders for me, or however, whatever metaphor you want to use for that.
I guess, yeah. I mean, I'm going to probably give it a 0 on recommendation. Again, not that it was a bad film, but it's by no means a must-watch. There's a lot of better stuff out there. Yes, they're good turns by the actors and the good performances, but you could probably pick films and things they've been in separately, and those are better. So yeah, it just it's on the weaker side of Netflix.
If I have to compare it to anything, it's like the Winston Churchill movie we saw last year.
Yeah, all right.
It's like
fair enough.
it's a good performance, but
mediocre film overall.
Mediocre film, yeah.
That's really funny because I remember that The Darkest Hour when it comes in conversation, but otherwise it's completely off my radar.
We only use it when referencing things like this.
Sorry,
apparently.
Steve, we've tried. But
and also, does this make Steven racist against South America because he doesn't show up for any of the movies?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, he's anti-Argentinian.
So speaking of racist, Steve-O, I'll give out the numbers.
Give us the football scores.
It's a 7 overall for all the same reasons. The plot was
Good, but not
lackluster. The antagonist was non-existent, but not a fault of the movie. And none of us recommended it, but not because it's a bad movie. It's kind of skippable. It's good performances and mediocre movie.
Yeah,
and it's about two popes.
It's just called The Two Popes.
just two popes.
Just two popes. Poping it up.
Wale, I'm Jonathan Manzer, here with a snorting Christopher Morgan.
Liberate tutame.
And damn it, what's the one for damnation, memoriam, or whatever? Oh, anyway,
Well,
I'm damning Scott's memory to hell.
We'll have to follow Chris's with X and Ferris, obviously. So yeah, with that, two popes. Just call that. Good night. See you next time.
Editing and engineering by Jonathan Ian Manser. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates. Or mods?